I'm curious when you're thinking about writing, what comes first for you? Is it the vibe? Is it the characters? Is it the plot? And how
Mhm.
do all of those interact as you're drafting?
Mm. I am definitely evolving as a writer. I used to just be a total pantser, just sit down, whatever came to mind. And it was very satisfying and freeing to do that. But then I'd get stuck at places like, where am I going? What is this about? So I've been, like, as we talked earlier a little bit about, before this podcast started, about craft. And so I've been working on learning more about plotting. So I call myself now a planter. So what I do is, and I didn't do it with this series, but I am doing it with what I'm writing now. So to address your question, I make a vision board now, which I didn't
Mhm.
do before. I had done a partial one for a Viking series that I had thoroughly researched. So I guess what I do is I start with the characters and I write down whatever comes to mind, and I do it often longhand in a notebook. And then I make the vision board, and writing the back, like with the back cover copy, like the
Mhm.
short summary of the story, that actually comes easy because for me, because if I know, okay, here's the conflict and here's the basic trope, then okay, I can fill in all the rest. And that's kind of how I go. Like I set myself up for when you give a proposal to an editor. So that's how I develop a series. With
Mm.
that mindset, a lot of just pantsing writing, longhand writing, and then whatever the scene is, it's in my head, and and then the vision board, and then the actual proposal where I start to like put really bones on it, I guess, if you will.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I always think it's interesting when it comes to matching back cover copy with the story. And sometimes I'm like, I'm going to write the back cover copy first. And I do that. And then I write the story and I'm like, that doesn't fit the back cover copy that I
Yeah.
wrote.
So then you adjust. Yeah.
So, one other thing I really loved from that passage that you read was there was a lot of specific character detail and especially imagery that Thomas had in his head
Mhm.
that was informed by his profession. Like he compared the North Sea,
Uh-huh.
which I presume he went to as a boat maker. So, at what point do you decide which comes first, deciding the profession and then researching and then writing, or have you done a lot of research and been like, oh, I want to write about a boat maker? Like, how's that process for you?
It's kind of both. I read a lot of nonfiction, and ideas, characters just spring up from reading nonfiction. Then on the other hand, when I knew he was going to be a whaler, so in this case with Thomas, I had to go and research the Howland Great Wet Dock, um, had like its provenance as a dock where all the ships were built, a little bit about the English whaling trade, because it was dying off at this time. It had been supplemented by the government so much, like in a competition between the Dutch, who were winning basically that competition. And so that actually plays into the conflict with Thomas and what's happening with him and what he wants. So yeah, so it's kind of both. My husband jokes that, like, oh, did Gina order some more books today? Are they coming to the house? And because I have a lot of books. So yeah, I love the research part. I love visiting museums and castles and going to places like I visited the Ben Franklin house in London kind of thing. And I was like, I know I'm going to find a way to, you know, get that into a book someday, because I like to write like squarely in the mid 1700s. So, and I don't know about you, but I found that if I really stick within like a 20, 10, 20, 30 window period of time, I can really drill down deep, and then you learn more of the little things that add life to historical romance stories. So maybe I'm really a historical fiction author who writes romance. I've wondered that sometimes.
I feel the same way. The more that I have stuck with Regency and learned about, I mean, you end up learning about the whole Georgian era
Mhm.
when you're researching Regency, but yes, your knowledge just gets deeper and deeper and more layered, and there are nuances you can uncover, and you understand why certain things that seem like they wouldn't have been a big deal were a big deal. It's just all like the dots start connecting. I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
And was that detail of her finger being stained by the brass thimble, was that something that like was a specific detail you came across in your research, or you just like knew that they were using brass thimbles and so that came to you naturally?
That just came to me. It was like, I think when we are falling in love, you pick up on the details of the person you love that others don't see. That so yeah, I didn't plan to write that about her finger and the thimble, and it's being stained green. It just sort of happened. And that's the beauty of like writing. That's the part that really makes me like puts my butt in the chair to, because I love that. It's a high almost, like, like you drink a bunch of wine because I wrote a great, I drank a bottle of wine.
I
It's
know what you mean.
Yeah, it's like the most amazing feeling being in that flow, and the characters are basically taking over the story. You've got the bones of the facts and about the time, but then now it's the characters are taking over, and that's the best day for a writer.
Yeah. Well, and I think that speaks to when you've done the research, like clearly you already knew some things, such as
Mm.
that she was a corset maker and that what her life would be like. So, what would that have impacted on her hands? And what kind of materials would she be using? And so you had
Mhm.
all of that that you weren't necessarily actively thinking about, but that
Right.
informed your writing so that you could find that really valid and true little moment that is so beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. I think the other thing too, we often like, oh, first kiss, oh, it's got to be, mouth to mouth. And really, I find it more interesting when a kiss is to different places. So, like that it was specifically to the middle finger, stained, her finger stained with the green. Like, I know who you are. I know that you work for a living, and he works for a living. So
Yeah. It's so
I love
specific.
commoners. Yes. And that, yeah, and that it was to her finger, and like that she felt that, like that it resonated deep in her soul. So
Yeah.